Thank you to Heart Society for our intro and outro music, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. As always, you can find us on all forms of social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can find us at BoardGameBarrage.com or join our Discord at BoardGameBarrage.com/Discord.
We've had a lot of people join recently, right?
Yeah, we have a lot for the Math Trade. Math Trade just wrapped up today, so that was exciting.
They're joining to talk to Nealon and I, Mark.
Yeah, I don't think the numbers would bear that out, but whatever gets you through the night. So let's get into our feature topic, chaos. Chaos versus randomness, chaos versus luck, just plain old chaos. We're getting chaotic today. You guys know your Dungeons & Dragons alignment table?
Yeah, where do you guys fall on the old alignment chart? I mean, we all know what Callan is.
We know what the chart is because it's like, which Star Trek character are you by stupid? I hate
Yes,
these
exactly.
charts.
Wait, so what Kellen is what, chaotic neutral?
Callan's, I would say, is chaotic neutral. That seems about right.
Yeah.
I am Slytherin House in the book that must not be named. So I am appalled that I am not put in chaotic evil. I mean, is any normal person in the evil category? Like that you interact with on a weekly basis?
Oh,
if so,
interesting.
I'm chaotic evil.
Yeah, I don't know. What am I? What are the things? It's chaotic.
So, yeah, it's chaos and order on one end of the axis, and then good and evil.
Or lawful, right? Isn't it lawful? Or is it
Lawful, lawful and evil.
Yeah, lawful.
What's the difference between lawful and good, Nealon?
No, wait, sorry. It's good and evil, lawful and chaotic. Sorry.
Yeah. So lawful good would be like a judge. Lawful evil would be like a dictator, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. And then chaotic good would be, what, like a merrymaker?
Chaotic good is sort of like your anti-hero type, right?
Like your Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
I think you said Barry Sanders. Okay, and then chaotic evil would be Kellen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chaotic evil just has Kellen.
I'm helping you define the parameters of this spectrum.
Right. All right, so let's end the D&D cast and go into our previously mentioned feature topic. So, chaos. I think when most people hear chaos when it comes to board games, they think of randomness, they think of luck. Kellen, can you dispel that belief?
Yeah, I think the impetus for this episode was us just sort of casually discussing chaos and how it maybe differed from luck. So
That's one of our usual casual conversations. We're just like sitting around having a drink, talking about chaos.
we talk all the time.
That's right. No, I agree. I'm just trying to set the mood for our listeners. Just imagine us with drinks and yeah.
Yeah, well, see, that's how it used to be before these two wanted to become professionals. And now anytime we talk, they say, turn the microphone on. We're missing gold right now.
Saved for the show.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I can't tell you what game I played until the mics were rolling.
I don't feel alive till the lights go on.
But yeah, I think we think about luck, right? We think about throwing a bunch of dice. We think about old Ameritrashy style games where you can't define the outcome of an encounter that you're about to get into. We think of event encounter cards, things that just happen that you have to deal with. But I think that there is more to it than that. Some of it comes from your own ability to know a system. I know that innovation is frequently cited as a very chaotic game. And I cite it as a system where you have to learn to control chaos. And innovation is obviously my favorite game ever, but as you learn, there are new layers and layers to the game that help you control what feels like chaos at the outset. But that burden of knowledge sort of shifts the chaos into something that's manageable. You know, in innovation, I actually literally this past week had a thought that I had never had before, which is that I was playing a game online and I had a card that said, draw a 4. If it has a crown on it, score it and repeat this act, something akin to that.
Yeah.
And I looked at the board and realized that 8 out of 10 of the 4s were depicted on the board itself, meaning there were only 2 cards that 4 could be. Right. So I went and actually looked at a deck list, which is not something I normally would do in a real game of it. And I looked at those 2 cards, and neither of them had a crown on it. So I actually could prove that I should not click that card. And I had never, ever, in the history of my playing of innovation, I played at least 100 times, thought that I would try hard at that much, and get to that level. And so what I mean to say here is that the chaos in innovation is information overload. It's action overload. And that action overload is overcome by knowledge, by literal knowledge.
Yeah. Neelan, what are your thoughts about the idea of luck versus the idea of chaos versus the idea of randomness?
To me, like, I fall back onto what I guess you would call, I don't know if it's actually strictly a mathematical term, but in mathematics, you would define chaos as,
We call it maths here, by the way.
well, do we? You have me confused for a second there. But yeah,
Chaos.
in maths, chaos would be defined as something where you have a deterministic input, but a sort of unknowable output. So even though all of the inputs into the system are deterministic, determined by the players, not a result of luck, it's still very hard to predict what the outcome is going to be.
Right.
So a good example of this is something like simultaneous play games.
Yes,
Right?
yeah.
Where everyone is specifically choosing the card they're going to play, but by design, they can't know how the turn is going to unfold until you see how everyone's card, as revealed, combines together. So although I wouldn't describe something like Gods of Atlantis, for example, as a high chaos game, although it's an entirely deterministic game, that is where the foul randomness comes in, the unpredictability. You don't know what the result is going to be once everyone's
Right.
cards are on the table.
And so that is not luck
That is not luck.
because you can anticipate what someone else could do.
Theoretically, it would be like if you were, I mean, this is debatable perhaps, but like theoretically at high level play of Gods of Atlantis, there's an element of anticipation of what the other player's most logical action is and then countering that in some way.
There's the idea that theoretically you could see what the most likely action is and what sort of paths that leads the game down to, like
Right.
where the game state evolves from that theoretical spot. It's the whole like butterfly effect idea, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the butterfly effect.
Oh,
You ever watched Jurassic Park, Kellen?
I have, but more recently.
You strike me as like an Ian Malcolm sort of character.
Yeah, he's definitely Ian Malcolm adjacent.
Yeah.
Wait, which one is that? Is he the cool?
He's the
Yeah,
goth mathematician.
I was hoping. I got a sense. I started shaking. Neelan, with your specific example of Guards of Atlantis, that strikes me that we recently played games of a fantastic card game called Six Nymphed, where I definitely made my way through the chaos, and then at the end you grumbled and said, "This is all luck, man."
I mean, no, but I mean, that's a
do you
good
do?
example of something that is chaos instead of luck, because there's no luck that determines the outcome. It's just the function of multiple players inputting their cards. And that's also a good example, actually, where player count hugely factors into chaos. I think a lot of people would say that Six Nymphed at a higher player count gets increasingly more chaotic, just
Right.
because as more people are entering their cards into the system, it's much harder to know how they're going to fall into the arrays.
So I think real quick,
Pause.
what'd you say? Oh.
Chaos.
I guess this is going to echo a lot of what you both have said, but yeah, for me, luck and randomness, I guess more luck, is just the idea of an unknowable sort of like input being put into a game like dice. I guess like an event deck, but an event deck is, I think, maybe more chaotic than luck. Whereas I think, as Neelan said, sort of chaos is the idea of there are a lot of ways. Again, I think the butterfly effect, and I think this is like shorthand that a lot of people know, the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Peru leads a string
Why
of events.
Peru?
What?
Why Peru specifically?
The
Where
Peruvian
butterflies
butterfly,
come from.
Peruvian monarch.
Oh,
Remember
this
Peruvian
is
monarch?
actually, this is canon. This is
Yeah.
canonical, what
That's
you
right.
just said. Oh, I
Exactly.
thought you just liked Peru.
No, I know all about butterflies. So anyway, the Peruvian monarch flaps its wings in Peru or Argentina. Maybe it's taking a trip, but that flap causes like a dust to
He
kick
could
up.
be anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. It could be anywhere. Causes this, causes that, and all of a sudden you have.
All of a sudden, I'm in Mensa.
That's right. That's how it worked for me. So the idea that something can happen that could cause a bunch of different things, and so that's I think what chaos is. Chaos is the idea that everything is knowable. You could theoretically have known that butterfly flap caused Kellen to finally get into Mensa, but it's so unlikely that it's not really calculable. But that's the idea of chaos versus luck, where the roll of a dice are completely theoretically random.
So then a game like Innovation, right, for you, this isn't falling in your definition of chaos that you've given, right? Because it's more about a knowledge gap or there is knowledge that you don't have, and once you have that knowledge, there is no longer chaos.
Right. The game gets less and less chaotic with more and more knowledge. But I think games can be so chaotic in that definition that even a lot of knowledge
Yeah.
doesn't lessen the level of chaos.
I definitely think that there are degrees to it, right? Because like if you knew the contents of everyone's hands in 6 Nimmt, it's very easy to know how that's going to play out. But even in a game like, say, Robo Rally, where even if you saw what everyone's program was, without really literally stepping through it step by step, it would be kind of impossible to know like what that would result in.
And would you describe Robo Rally as a chaotic game?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's actually probably one of my go-to examples of a game where you know exactly what your robot is going to do, but it's interference with everyone else's plans that leads to the game, basically.
Yeah, there is no luck in terms of what you're doing or the input you're putting into Robo Rally, but it's all about, how things sort of unwind themselves.
And as it relates to the butterfly effect, the Peruvian butterfly effect, if Robo Rally had you only planning one move out, it would be less chaotic?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say so. Substantially less.
Because then you could say, like, okay, Kellen's robot is likely to do one of these things.
Right.
Can only get this far
Right,
from
yes.
that exact
Yeah.
location or position.
But it's almost impossible to know where your robot will end up, let alone at the end of everyone else's actions. So, Callan, Christina, and I have been playing a game called Path of Light and Shadow. Path of Light and Shadow is by Indie Boards and Cards, designed by Jonathan Gilmore, Travis Chance, and Nick Little. This is a deck builder adjacent game. We'll come back to why I say adjacent. Area control game. So it's a game with a board where you have people moving around a map, staking claim of various provinces, but your actions play out using a deck building mechanic. At the start of the game, you have, as with most deck builders, a deck of 10 cards. There's a little bit of randomness in there as to one card that is unique to each of the players. And then you're going to be acquiring cards based on different realms on the map. So if you end your turn in the Woodland realm, for example, you're going to add 1 or 2 cards to your deck randomly from the Woodlands deck. Those go into your discard pile, and the same thing as most deck builders, once your deck cycles through, they will now be in your hand and available to play. The reason why I say deck builder adjacent is because it's unlike most deck builders in that you don't have full control of what goes into your deck. You're only going to know what got added once they sort of circulate back into your hand. And then it's up to you to determine how you then use those cards, whether you upgrade them into better versions of those cards, try to get them out of your deck. And the main way that plays out is through this idea of the game being divided into 2 paths. This is where the Path of Light and Shadow name comes in. So the Path of Light.
Guess which path that Neelan took?
This is the path
Mark.
that I stupidly took. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Were you asking Mark?
Well, I mean, he knows all about our
Yeah.
alignments, so
Neelan took light and Kellen took shadow.
that's right.
sure.
And would you predict the outcome of the game right here for us, good sir?
Christina won.
Nope.
So the way that plays out is if you take the Path of Light, you're gaining Mercy. And there are a couple of ways to gain Mercy. The easiest to gain Mercy is to not just add 1 random card into your deck, but to add 2 at the end of your turn.
And Mark, guess how you get more evil?
It would be opposite of mercy.
Uh-huh.
Right. So instead of getting people into your deck, what do?
You kill them, get them out of your deck.
That's what I'm saying. You go down every time you trash one.
There you go.
And that's kind of, in one ways, one of the big core cruxes of the game is exactly that. If you go down the cruelty path, you're narrowing your deck. You're being more selective about what ends up in it. And if you've played a lot of deck builders, you know that this is generally good. You want less cards in your deck, ultimately. So the Mercy players end up with a bigger deck. They have less control over what's in there. The Cruelty players end up with a smaller deck. The Cruelty players also lend themselves, I think, more to an attacky style of moving out into the board, attacking provinces through the combat system, which is a mix of the cards you play and dice you roll. And the Mercy players, I would say, should tend to be focusing more on like tableau building, promoting cards in their deck, building buildings, which are sort of more focused off of the main player board. So there is this interesting sort of like contrast between more control over what you're producing in the Mercy game versus less control over what's in your deck versus the Cruelty game of more control of what's in your deck, but then you're relying on combat, which is a little bit more dicey. So there is kind of this interesting little mix of systems of randomness, systems of chaos in Path and Light and Shadow. Kellen, what are your thoughts on the game?
I think you're underselling even the disparity between these two things. You know, Neelan showed me his deck at the end of the game, and I swear to God, it had like 40 cards in it. And he's like, I haven't seen half of these in my hand. And I had 9 cards, and they were all upgraded assassins that were just devastating the
Right.
board. And so from the outset, I think that was a bad design decision to tie culling and adding cards to your deck to that path. From what I understand of people who play the game a lot is that sort of sitting in the middle is not a viable path to winning the game. You need to either go one or the other in order to really viably play. And I think that a lot of people prefer that culling kind of deck. That's a fun thing to do in a deck builder, to have a very efficient deck. And so if your signpost for what deck building is Dominion, I think that near the 2/3 mark of the game, Christina and Neelan were annoyed at their decks, and I was just hitting my peak and getting pretty excited about it. I think it is remarkable how much shared DNA this has with Dead Reckoning, a pirate Kickstarter game that we recently covered, where you actually can upgrade the cards in your deck. I have actually talked about games like Slay the Spire, a digital game, and said that's the difference between a digital card game and a physical one, is that you can't upgrade a card. But in this game, like, it's annoying. The card at the bottom says upgrade to this, and then you have to go fish through a deck, and you literally can replace cards with upgraded versions of them. So I just said a lot, and I didn't even answer Neelan's question, which is what I want to do. I enjoyed this perhaps more than I expected. I think it is a very interesting comparison right up next to Dead Reckoning, like right next to Dead Reckoning, because they both employ a very similar Dominion-inspired deck building thing and then go do whatever you want with that thing that you did, and it's very tight and efficient. You know, there are only 12 turns in a game of Path of Light and Shadows. It is intriguing. I don't know that I love it.
I think that I landed on admiring a lot of the choices in the design. Like, it was one of those things where, on reflection, the idea that like both sides play with different amounts of randomness and control, I thought that was actually quite novel and interesting. I can't imagine like playing the Mercy side and then also trying your hand at combat, which is probably actually what I and Christina were doing more than we should have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you real quick. Let me just jump in. Kellen mentioned looking at discussion about this game online and people saying that they either go one way or the other. Is it that the dark side, the culling side, has been perceived by the people playing it to be an overpowered strategy or a strong strategy? Or was it the idea that Neelan and or Christina didn't commit to the Mercy side strong enough?
I think that's exactly it, the latter. Like, I think from everything I found and from what Kellen had sort of mentioned to us while we were playing it did seem quite balanced if you went to the correct extremes of both ends. I think Christina and my mistake was engaging too much with Kellen at a game he was much better at because of his deck.
I see.
Which is all games.
Yes, exactly. It would have behooved us more to like focus on our tableau building, which is what, you know, the Mercy cards lend themselves actually to building and promoting. So it's almost like telling you a little bit to do that. But it's one of those games that's deceptive because you have this big board in front of you that you're moving around on and you're fighting cities. And to some extent, I wonder if the perfect Mercy game is almost to ignore that. And it was a question I had for Kellen in the middle of our game, but we didn't have a solid feel for it at that point.
I don't think you could get away with not doing any of it. I think
right. It's about finding the right balance.
Yeah, little moments of it. And a whole system. This game is dense with interlocking systems that work well together. You know, there's an entire tech tree that we haven't even spoken about.
Right.
And the Mercy player, there's a specific action that allows a Mercy player, when they buy cards, to actually put them on the top of their deck as opposed to in their discard pile. Right. So after turn 7 or 8, Neelan and Christina could not have even gotten those cards back into their hands, and so they needed to have that part of the tech tree unlocked in order to better take advantage of something like that.
Right.
It's an odd one. It's very interesting. It's kind of a cult favorite. I think it is out of print now, but you see a lot of love and a lot of people going, man, I wish this had an expansion. Man, I really like that. And so it's always been on my mind as something to look at and acquire, and I think I got it in the math trade, Board Game Barrage math trade.
Yep, the first of 3 math trades. How long do you think this game would take to play once you are familiar with the rules?
So setup and teardown is a pain in the butt, hugely, because it's like sort these into different realms, and then there's the upgrade deck, and then your deck, and then your special card. It's pretty annoying, and putting it away was annoying. And there's only 12 turns per player.
Right.
I'll bet you it's a 2-hour game.
I mean, it took us 2 hours in our first play, so I think you could
get
it down. Yeah, I think
you
could get it down to like an hour and a half, an hour maybe even with enough.
And I do think that this would be a game that would be played at our Dean game nights and played out in a couple weeks. Like, hey, let's do that again. Like, because there's fun things happening and
Sure.
you enjoy what's happening. The tech tree thing, it reminded me of having a giant board and Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. Like that sort of chaos of not knowing what someone else could do or was capable of as they moved down this sort of tech tree. The benefit in Path of Light and Shadow is that everyone's board was the same versus the aforementioned Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, where everyone has their own like 27 powers that you don't know anything about.
The aforementioned and never to be mentioned again.
That we somehow keep mentioning.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I actually have this game. I brought it to a game night at Dean's. And the reason I asked you about the play length is because I remember reading the rule book and just thinking it was like so interlocking and so oddly dense that I didn't even propose it at that game night because I just thought it was too much going on. And I was worried that subsequently that it would also be a long, long playtime.
I will say this about it is that there is, much like something like Inish, there is actually a simplicity to the rule set of the game where a lot of the actual depth comes from just knowing the cards, and reading what the cards do. But the actual systems, especially if you're familiar with deck builders, are quite intuitive. There's not that much like upfront rules explanation. There's just a lot to be like, okay, I'm not sure what I do with this information.
We are notorious for wanting to know every rule before we start a game, but I think I actually left out a couple of things intentionally until we were like a turn and a half in. Just to, once you see that system, once you go through a turn, it all like kind of clicks for you.
How chaotic are you, Kellen?
Exactly. I wanted that W, which I got.
That is Path of Light and Shadow by Indie Boards and Card.
So let's talk about chaotic games, maybe specifically, and whether or not these games that feature a lot of chaos are games that we like, and maybe what we like about them. I'll start it off with a game that has some level of chaos, I think, in its simultaneous action selection, which, like Neelan said, I think is a good indication of a game that has a lot of chaos. This is a game that won the Spiel a couple years ago, but it's a game that I bounced off of pretty hard. This is Broom Service. In Broom Service, you all play witches, and you can select simultaneously an action to do, and you can either do the weak version of it or the strong version of it. And the risk you're taking in selecting to do the strong version of it is if somebody later in turn order is also doing the strong version of it, you don't get to do it. So whereas if you choose to do the weak version of an action in Broom Service, you're guaranteed to do it. If you choose to do the strong version of the action, you are risking not doing it at all. I think it is that chaos, for whatever reason, that I think maybe turned me off Broom Service. I think it's one of the reasons. I think the board is unclear, and for some reason, the lack of clarity in the board, the lack of like knowing what you're adjacent to and what you're affecting in Broom Service really bothers me as well. But the chaos in Broom Service was always something that bugged me.
You're saying because you're not good at predicting whether you should be a desert fairy?
I'm not good at choosing when I should be brave and when I should be cowardly. I always go brave, Kellen. You know that about me.
That's true. We learned that from your alignment chart at the beginning of the episode.
That's right. Kellen, what's an example
Brave.
of a game with chaos?
Yeah, so an example of a game that I thought would be good to articulate here because of what they've done with recent editions of the game is Wiz War. So in Wiz War, you are these magic magicians. Well, I guess that's
The best type of magician.
self-evident. Yes. Thank you, Neelan. Even better than Victorian. But in Wiz War, you have a hand of special power cards that are analogous to like Magic the Gathering cards. Crazy powers, fun things happening. And that chaos is essential to the game. You never know what another wizard has. So in the most recent edition, in order to tone down the chaos, they actually tell you to take a smaller subset of the spells that are available and just use that deck for this game. So everyone knows, oh, this game is going to be about slowing people down and transforming them into other creatures. So let's reduce the chaos of that deck and make it a little bit more palatable. Hell no. That's not how you play Wiz War, okay? We've been playing this for a long time. How you play Wiz War is you put all the cards together and you never know what the hell you're going to get. And then on top of that, what makes Wiz War so great is it's not just Fireball spell, right? It's the Fireball spell that can be modified by other cards in your hand. How powerful is that spell? How far does it go? It isn't just, okay, I think Kellen has a Fireball, therefore I need to stay 2 radius away. Hell no. I'm upgrading that with my 5 card, and now it's going all across the map. You can't do jack shit about it. That's Wiz War. That is good chaos. You both suck at this game, so don't say anything negative about it. Like, we know you're about to.
I thought Wiz War was crazy fun. You have to sort of take it in the way that I think it's meant to be.
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
right
you
spirit.
don't try hard that. You have a good time.
Yeah, as long as you just
Something
don't care
we
about
haven't
anything.
done.
Just go in there
2020.
nihilistic. You don't care. Just do whatever happens.
Right.
Throw a fireball. Make somebody a frog. Flood
That's
the
what
whole
I'm
thing.
saying.
Throw
Turn them
cards
into a stone, carry them around as a cantrip, cat,
Yep.
nip,
As cat,
Everdeen.
catnip.
I love that card.
Slytherin, Chaos, Callan, Wizwar. Great example of chaos in a game. It is not just luck, certainly. There's definitely a lot of randomness in that form of chaos, but it's about carving your path and then taking advantage at the exact right moment because you can blow your wad quite early,
Your fire wad.
Metaphorically.
speaking.
Nealon.
So, one of the things I was thinking about when we suggested this topic was the idea of whether real-time games fell into this category. Because I think one of the things that's tempting to say is that real-time games are chaotic, but not necessarily in the way that we're describing. But I do think one of the ways that they absolutely do fit is one of the other things that leads to chaos, other than player decisions and determinism, are small mistakes or unintentional mistakes. And one of the things that real-time games absolutely heighten is the number of unintentional mistakes you make. So when you make a small slip up and that leads to like an advantage that the other player makes. So in a game like Captain Sonar, for example, where because you're sort of there's this timed, real-time nature to it. There's a lot of pressure. The little slip-ups are the things that lead to like the emergent moments in the game, the little moments of chaos that other people can capitalize on and that you have to react to. And I think that that's where this idea of good chaos, like, inserts itself into like real-time games. And one of the games that I think most typifies this because it contains both this element and like actual simultaneous play chaos is Space Alert. Space Alert is one of my favorite chaotic games because it's a cooperative game where you're all under the gun of time. You're reacting to things in real time. You're sort of saying what you're going to be doing and hoping other people pick up on what you're doing and are appropriately responding to that. But like in Robo Rally, once all the cards are revealed, you're just tripping over each other. And that's hilarious. And it's part of the game. If you were playing a game of Space Alert perfectly, you're playing Space Alert wrong because it's
Right.
where it goes wrong and how you recover from that where all the fun in that game is.
Yeah, I love Space Alert for that very aspect of it. Just like you think you have a handle of it on it, and then things start to like to shake and fall apart, and then it's just like everything sort of
Right.
compounds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You used the word emergent, right?
Yes.
Oh, I hope you did because
No, I did.
call us out if you didn't.
Sorry, I was anticipating your question, but sorry, go ahead.
What's my question?
Is emergence like basically a function of chaos?
Do I even need to be here?
I would say like, yeah, absolutely. I think emergence is like systems that are known and understood leading to unintentional results. And I think that is absolutely a form of chaos.
There's this thing that we kind of talked about off the air when you let me turn the microphone off, where in a Euro game, in a heavily regulated Euro game, 2.5 rounds before the end of the game, you might know that I'm only capable of scoring 6 points per round. And then I'm out of contention to win the game. And that takes away some of those emergent moments. Like some of my favorite moments in a game in Dune when something crazy just happens that like you didn't anticipate that could be possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, bar none, my favorite type of experience in a game is when you outfox people, when something unexpected happens in that framework. And I think that's much harder to do the more structured the game flow and the way points are scored. And so it's this weird balance between those things because you don't want it to just be chaos. Mm-hmm. Like there has to be enough structure to what's happening in order for that chaotic thing or that emergent thing to make you go boom, make you go wow. Like
Right.
It has to be there. And so it's this interesting tension.
So I met up with listener Kevin today and executed a trade, as I'm wont to do. So a big shout out to Kevin, who said that he listens to our podcast and So Very Wrong About Games, and I could tell by the look in his eyes that he prefers us a great deal more than them. But one of the games I traded Kevin for was Jixia Academy, Jixia. X's in words are difficult. Well, how would you pronounce it? Would you pronounce it Jixia?
This is hard. Is the theme Chinese? Because X's aren't pronounced like X's.
Is the theme Chinese?
No, I mean, that's
What theme of food do you want for dinner?
that's not what I meant by that. It could be that it's not pronounced X. I don't know.
Because like Oaxaca,
I've been very helpful.
X,
I love that you attempted it and then I don't know. Like, you tried, you went for it.
The problem is I can't remember how X's are pronounced in Chinese, so.
Well, if you know how to pronounce it, go to our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord and maybe record yourself saying it. Can you do that? You could do that at Discord, right?
Sure.
Yeah. We'll have a Jixia off. The person who records the best version of Jixia, I'll send him a game or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. We're crazy. This is chaos. This is the chaos episode.
For sure.
So Jixia Academy, to make things much less chaotic, is really only a retheming of Hanami Koji. It's a straight retheming of that game. Hanami Koji is a game that I've played a number of times before and I really, really enjoyed, but I have not had it in my collection, so I picked up Jixia Academy to right that wrong. Aside from a swap of the theme, in Hanami Koji there was some sort of geisha. You were influencing geishas. In Jixia Academy, you are influencing scholars. You were wandering around the countryside.
But it's like Hanami Koji is get hot chicks and Jixia Academy is get hot dudes.
Sure. That's, yeah.
Well, I mean, sure. What do you mean? Are all?
What do I mean? You're the one who's saying
Is that what a normal set of scholars looks like, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely.
They are unnaturally attractive scholars, I will say, on the cards.
I'm only like with them for their minds. But anyway. So Jixia Academy and Hanami Koji are strictly two-player games. It sort of has the flavor a little bit of games like Shoten Toten or Battle Line, where you are fighting over scoring outpost cards that have different scores on them. And the way that you're doing that is every round you are taking 4 actions. You can take them in any order you want, and you alternate between your turn and the opponent's turn, but you're doing one of 4 things. Place a card face down. This is like your secret action where you are not going to reveal a card until the end of the round. The second action is discard 2 cards. The third action is that you putting 3 cards out and your opponent will choose 1 and you get the other 2. And the final one is you create 2 sets of 2 cards and your opponent picks 1 and you take 1. So this is a game, again, along the lines of Arboretum, where every action you feel like you're giving up too much information or you're making the wrong move at the wrong time and you're convinced your opponent is in like a much better position and you're just going to exacerbate your worst position by whatever you do. So it's just a game where you're constantly feeling like you're making the wrong decision and you always just sort of want to pass. You feel like the best action would be just to pass it back. I've heard from a number of people that this is a game that suffers with repeated plays. I have not played it enough times where that's been an issue, but I've heard that as a common gripe with Hanami Koji and subsequently Jixia Academy.
I've not heard that.
You have not?
No.
I've seen it online in commentary on BGG, and I know, for example, I think Sugeki Dan on our Discord has had the same issue. I could be misrepresenting that, and I apologize.
Yeah, I think I like this better than most / all of them. I think this is better than Airland and Sea 100%.
Yeah.
It's simpler, and I could see that there must be some high-level play where, depending on what your card hand is, you should do this thing.
Right.
But it's so straightforward and elegant in how you play the game. And I've probably played it at least 15 or 20 times. And there is an element of luck to it, right? That you have more mitigation in Airland and Sea by virtue of saying, I'm out of this round.
Right.
The I'm out of this round is such a good catch-all for Airland and Sea to be like, even if it's not balanced, well, who cares? I'm out this round.
Right. Yeah.
Where you don't have that out in Hanami Koji. It's not baked into it. It's just simpler. You compare it to a game like Lost Cities, which it's simpler and you don't have to do all the math, but it has 95% of that decision space. So it's love it.
Why not do it? Yeah.
This is one of my favorite games. It's in my top 50. It's a game I played a bunch. I don't think that it's necessarily outlived its welcome at all yet. I played this actually fairly recently, maybe a month ago, with a partner that does not play many games at all, and she really, really liked it. I was worried that it would have that problem that we talk about with it, where it just feels very punishing, but she found it really engaging despite how simple the rule set for it is. It doesn't hurt that it's a beautiful game to look at least Hanami Koji is. Like, I assume Jixia Academy is exactly the same.
Those geishas.
Yes.
Yeah, and Jixia Academy is also gorgeous. If anything,
those scholars.
The scholars are gorgeous. Again, I'm only with them for their minds, but there's a slight, I think, component upgrade with Jixia that is completely superfluous. But hey, if you want little cutout swords to indicate that you've won a card, you got them here. So that is Jixia Academy. Okay, so let's wrap up our conversation on chaos with closing thoughts, closing ideas we might have about the topic. Neelan.
Yeah, I think that one of the things for me that's interesting about this discussion is like the nature of where the right amount of chaos in a game is, right? Like, I think that a lot of the games you've spoken about as positive examples of this are games where the chaos feels rewarding or leads to the highs of the game. And there are times where that doesn't work as well for me. And I think one example of that in my case is something like maybe Cosmic Encounter, where a game that...
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, Kellen. A game where it is not really that random. You know, it has a deck of cards in it, but so do many games. But it is a game where you don't know what the other players are going to do. There is a heavy amount of power interplay, card revealing, and the results end up in this unknowable state that is fun to react to, but not for the length of time that Cosmic Encounter wants you to engage with that chaos. That's kind of where I sort of hit the wall a little bit.
And that's interesting, right? And how I think it's interesting is as follows. In a game like Mission Red Planet, which is an area control game with simultaneous action selection, but is a little bit of a Euro game like El Grande, that simultaneous action selection, I hate it. I hate the chaos when it's present in that Euro framework, because it's like, how the hell was I supposed to know that Neelan was going to play the 3 card in a game of Raptor? Like, I have no way of knowing that. But in Cosmic Encounter, when the very foundation of the game is not a structural, procedural, orderly Euro game, the structure of the game is alliances. And people will be able to do things that you can't fathom right now. And you have to give away some of that control. So for me, you know, Cosmic Encounter is more chaotic than Mission Red Planet, but it exists within a system that complements it, in my opinion. And so I think that it's important. It's not just chaos in any game. It's like chaos in what system it's being applied to.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that actually sort of clarifies sort of what my thoughts are in terms of games that I don't like and I do like with chaos. Like Room Service I don't like, maybe because it has that Euro side to it, and just the idea that I feel like a lack of control or a lack of being able to see where it's going bothers me for a game like that, and bothers me for like a game like Colt Express. That's another game with chaos, with the simultaneous action programming that I never really got into, just because it just seemed so unknowable.
Right.
Like sort of like Robo Rally. It has that Robo Rally sort of thing to it, where you can plan, you can think, but it's really it's just going to sprawl out into whatever. And with Robo Rally, I think, at least with people who've played it before, you sort of go into a game of Robo Rally understanding like it's just going to be crazy. Like it's not going to go necessarily to the best player or whatever. It's just going to be a crazy like fun fest sort of thing.
It also seems to me, I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but the chaos feels fun in Robo Rally when it happens, but it just feels annoying in Colt Express. And I don't know, I don't even know what that line is exactly.
Yeah, and that's what I'm having a hard time sort of like figuring out. Like it feels annoying to me in Broom Service and Colt Express, but another game that has action selection where I like it, and I think there's some reason that I can articulate as to why I like it, is Libertalia. Libertalia is a simultaneous action selection where you are given 9 cards to start the round, and you're picking a pirate, and each of them have a number assigned to them, and I can't remember if it's the lowest number goes first, the highest number goes first, and so everybody reveals a card, and then you take actions in that order, and then that determines who's going to get the most treasure and the least treasure, and all the characters have different powers, and so it's hard to figure out like what somebody's going to play. You have some idea because, and here's the thing with Libertalia, is that everybody has the same cards to start around. So there are, I think, like 18 different cards in the deck, but everybody starts with the same cards. So like they're randomly selected, but everybody then pulls those specific cards out of their deck. So there's some control there. And furthermore, every round lasts 6 cards. So everybody's going to play 6 cards, but you could play different cards. So at the end of a round, the 3 cards Kellen has left over could be different than the 3 cards I have left over. It could be different than the 3 cards Neelan has left over. And then we draw more cards. And again, we're drawing the same cards at the end of every round, but there is some little like mixture there of we're all drawing the same cards, but what did we carry over from the last round? There's some like more chaos in that, but it feels a little more controlled because most of the cards we're getting and most of the cards that we're playing, we have an idea of what they were. You know, like Kellen didn't play his captain card in the last round, so he's holding it there. And the reason I know Kellen has it in his hand is because I started with it. I played it in the first round, and Kellen did not play in that round, so I know he still has it. So it's that like chaos, but you can sort of feel like you have control, like a little bit more of control of it. And maybe it's like a false sense of control. Maybe if I thought about it more, I'd realize that like I'm playing Libertalia like I'm playing Robo Rally. Like I really don't know. But I just have that sense with Libertalia, like, okay, I have an idea of what people could do a little bit more, if that makes any sense.
I feel like I've expanded my own definition here a little bit through the course of this episode. And some of the highest highs come because there is chaos present, or there is a lack of just straight order to the process, or the Euro gates that we sometimes talk about. And that leads to the highest highs and some of the most fun that I have playing board games. And that isn't just straight like an event deck. You know, you think about a game like Scythe, and the level of chaos, quote unquote, in Scythe is very small.
Yeah.
It's very small, but
it's strictly like the encounter deck. Yeah.
But it's so maddening. It ruins it for me. It doesn't ruin it for everyone, but literally Nealon on the first turn draws a better encounter card than I do, and then gets to workshop his way into better actions for the rest of the game. And they're very tiny. So for me, it's about the subsystems that it's built upon. Scythe is a Euro game, and so it shouldn't have that level of chaos added into it. It shouldn't have an event deck for me, versus, you know, all the other games we talked about, Cosmic Encounter, where you can't even fathom how Nealon and Mark are going to combine their 2 powers and the 3 cards that you've never heard of into something that's awesome. So, it's very interesting. Chaos is very important. That's my final thought. Love it.
Chaos.
Love. Chaos. We haven't been saying it as emphatically as I had hoped. Chaos. It's kind of hard on cue, you know, to be emphatic.
Right.
To be chaotic.
Well,
we just all say chaos a bunch of times and just randomly insert them into the episode, Mark.
Okay. Chaos.
Chaos.
What do you guys like? Evil monster? Chaos.
I'm trying to be more like you.
That's
more
not
like chaotic
what?
evil. I'm just trying to be like you, Kellen.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's going to do it for a discussion on chaos.
So one of the games that I have been eager to get everyone to try is a classic Euro hybrid dudes on a map, people on a map game, Chaos in the Old World. Chaos in the Old World is a Eric Lang game. It is cited early and often, and it is a lacking piece of experience from our area control and people on a map expertise. In Chaos in the Old World, everyone is in the Warhammer universe. I know literally nothing about the Warhammer universe, so I'm going to butcher this. The board is human skin stretched, and so that's hard to see. Thanks a lot, Mr. Eric Lang.
To be clear, it's a depiction of human skin.
That's fair. And in Chaos in the Old World, everyone plays an asymmetric faction that is vying for area control of the board. This comes to us before Blood Rage. This comes to us before Cthulhu Wars. In the game, the most interesting thing is that everyone has a unique deck of, I believe, 24 cards that are giving them special abilities on the board with 5 different upgrades that are available to only them. And you're actually playing sort of 2 different types of area control. There is the traditional area control that is scoring you victory points, and if anyone gets to 50 victory points, they win the game. And there is, everyone has a dial, and you have an objective that you have to fulfill each round in order to click your dial. And the player who has fulfilled that objective the most times each round will actually get to click twice. And if you ever click your dial all the way up, you win the game in a different way. So there are 2 very disparate win conditions. And the way that you click your dial is different for every faction. But primarily it has to do with having cultists on the board who are not very strong at the traditional area control battling. Before we talk about what we like and dislike about this game, I do want to say that Cthulhu Wars, one of my favorite games of all time, is sharing 30-40% of the exact same DNA.
It's funny because one of my overriding thoughts or feelings when we were playing Chaos in the Old World was saying, Cthulhu Wars, an Eric Lang game. That is not fair, but...
Yes, and of course, we would say Chaos in the Old World, a Sandy Peterson game, just to make people really mad.
Yes,
That's the chaotic thing to do here.
Exactly.
If Mr. Peterson has not played Chaos in the Old World, he is a liar.
Yes, that's right.
Neelan and Mark, what did you think of Chaos in the Old World? Emphasis on the chaos.
I really liked it. It is a game that I felt like I wanted to play again. I did get a Cthulhu Wars sort of feeling in that way. It was like with Cthulhu Wars, as soon as I was finished, I both wanted to play my same faction again because I thought I felt I had a better grasp over it, and also I wanted to play somebody else's faction because they just seemed really cool. So that was like a similar vibe I got after playing Chaos in the Old World. We talked about this as we were playing it, but Cthulhu Wars mitigates the luck by having you roll a bunch of dice, whereas with Chaos in the Old World, the luck seemed to be a little heightened because you're rolling fewer dice, so hits and misses are much more influential and game affecting. I never rolled a dice in that game because I was playing a faction that didn't do much fighting, but I could
You
see
never
how
rolled
You
dice?
weren't in
I
a
never rolled a
single
single
combat?
die.
You coward.
No, I was in a combat, but I was never
only from the receiving end of
aggressor.
cultists.
I was
Yeah.
chaotic good. So it's funny because I wonder if I was in a faction that needed to roll dice and I had either a very good string of rolls, as Christina did, or a very bad string of rolls. Kellen referred to Christina's dice rolling as mathematically impossible, or bordering on mathematically impossible. But I wonder if that would have affected my feeling about the game. Maybe I would have had a good string and liked the game more than I should, or had a bad string and felt worse about it. But as I was, maybe I'm in a good position to say that, like, from my vantage point, without the dice rolling being too much of a factor, I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to playing it again.
One of the things that I found interesting about that game in particular is Kellen had warned us at length that Christina's faction, Khorne, is the one to look out for. They are cited in most newbie games of Chaos in the Old World as the faction most likely to win.
With the worst name.
Yes.
Khorne.
So your role as one of the players opposing Khorne is just to be constantly beating them down, to be keeping them in check. And that, married with Christina's absurd dice rolling, led to a game where she did win. But I will say, to the game's credit, it was actually pretty close at the end between the three of you. Like, in the last couple of turns, it was this really tense knife's edge away moment where Mark or Kellen wins that game. And I was given the expectation that Khorne was just going to run away with it in our first game. I did think that was interesting. It did seem much more tightly balanced than even I had heard, because I think the perception of Khorne in that game is a lot of what I believe people generally dislike about Chaos in the Old World. So I was immediately impressed by how different all of the factions felt, both in terms of how they play and in how their win objectives work. You're targeting very different things throughout the game, and you have very different strengths. Like, my faction was geared towards more of the victory point win versus the click your dial win. And I think that led to a similar reaction to Mark, where I immediately was very interested in playing it again. I think the biggest problem with Chaos in the Old World is it does not match my love for Cthulhu Wars. Cthulhu Wars feels like the more refined, better version of Chaos in the Old World, with a lot of the pain points, namely the possibility of low luck outcomes damaging the game, and with some of the card draw mitigation problems. This deck of 24 power cards you have largely determines the abilities you're able to play, and if your hand gets flooded with expensive ones earlier in the game, that's tough. Cthulhu Wars does away with a lot of that. There are no events in Cthulhu Wars. It unfortunately suffers in comparison to Cthulhu Wars.
And I would agree with that. I would agree that I would rather play Cthulhu Wars than Chaos. I feel like it doesn't feel like a game necessarily to me, at least at this point, where it feels like Cthulhu Wars has replaced Chaos in the Old World. Like, I don't feel like I would never want to play Chaos because I could just play Cthulhu Wars, although I could see that eventually being the case for me, but they still feel like two interesting, fun games for me at this point. Like, two games I still would want to play. I wouldn't necessarily just say, oh, why are we going to play Chaos in the Old World when we can play Cthulhu Wars?
Exactly. I think that was my reaction, was along the same lines of I would never turn down a game of Chaos in the Old World. I enjoyed the heck out of it, despite losing quite badly, which is a good sign to me normally. I think it makes an interesting use of the Warhammer license. It's all tied around the Chaos faction, all the different old gods of Chaos. The miniatures, at least as they were rendered in Tabletop Simulator, are just weird and interesting, like in the same way that Cthulhu Wars' miniatures are just like bizarre to look at. Chaos in the Old World has that as well. It's a bizarre looking game with a lot of really interesting systems, And yeah, one I would definitely not turn down another game of, absolutely.
I think that the system whereby you have each round to pay attention to the dial advancement is so good, is incredible. Because in a game of incremental victory points, right, when someone gets to 50 victory points, they win, and what does that matter if Mark scores 11 or 12 in a round or 6 in a round? Like, it's whatever. But the clicking of these dials, you have to make that happen each round in order to stay competitive on that objective. And you also have to be the one with the most tokens on your dial in order to click twice. And so it's this constant tactical game of, okay, well, Nealon looks like he's going to get 2, Mark is going to get 1, Christina's going to get 3, to the point where you may not be able to get the most dial advancement tokens, but you actually want everyone else to tie so that no one gets to click twice. And so suddenly you're on Nealon's team for half of a turn, and you have to constantly evaluate that. Well, I could score 4 victory points, or I could ensure that Nealon and Christina stay at the same place and click on the dials. I think it's masterful. It's fascinating. Over the course of the game, I went through so many different phases of love and hate. I have played this game before, but not in many, many years. I was like, oh my God, is this better than Cthulhu Wars? Oh my God, I have $700 of Cthulhu Wars things. And then I was like, oh, this isn't as good as Cthulhu Wars. Okay. I'm okay. But just barely, I think.
Yeah.
There was a moment where, and you can directly compare these decks of cards. Everyone has a set of 24 cards, and it feels chaotic because you don't know what they are or what they're capable of. It uses a very strict action point system that feels very chess-like. If this sounds exactly like Cthulhu Wars, it's because it is exactly like Cthulhu Wars, Mr. Peterson. And as you take turns, you move down, and so you want to have power points when other players are at 0. And Mark had a card that just screwed me, which is like, hey, if you're in an area with me, I steal 1 of your power and I get 1 power. And so my entire first turn was screwed up because I had planned it out. You plan it out in advance, like a Euro, and then you try to make it happen. He used it on me in the first round. Shame on him for being an for doing that. Then again, in the final round, he used that card again on me. Shame on me for being in the same area as him. And so that felt chaotic. I felt like garbage when he did. Well, I felt like garbage both times he did it. But the second time was deserved. And the first time, it was just straight chaos of the system.
Right.
And Cthulhu Wars replaces that with powers that you can see, that you know about the entire game. And so there's these little differences, but they're flavors of the same thing, man. And it's hard to sort that out in your head. I am one that is very protective of things that I think are innovative and interesting, and I don't like it when other people just go, hey, here's that, I'm going to make it cooler.
Right.
I don't know. It was good. We had a good time.
Yeah. It was definitely, and it's definitely like a great experience. It gave us an experience that was like unlike a medium weight Euro. Like there was spice to it.
It's the sort of game that I've been itching to play for months at this point, and even just having that opportunity to play a game like that with you guys was great.
Now I'm just wondering if I should buy it.
I think I have 2 copies of it.
What are you talking? You're holding out on me?
No.
How long have you had these 2 copies?
God,
Long
I kind
time.
of won my own copy of it as well.
I have 2 copies, and I have them with the super harder to find Horned Rat expansion in both.
You horned rat.
I have been called that.
And that is Chaos in the Old World by Eric Lang.
Melding together. And joining me as always is Kellen the Red Tank
Hello.
and Nealon the Orange Tank.
Hello.
And I am Mark the Green Tank. Thanks for joining us for episode number 134 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. On this episode, we're talking about chaos.
They say the truth is a number one stopper. They say you think, but you never want to speak up. They say you're hot and there you be safe, but what's on your mind, kid? What's on your mind, kid? They say out loud there will never be me.
Input. Sorry.
They're coming for Kellen.
Yeah, sorry.
Chaotic evil.
That's all good.
Yeah, they heard that that's a Slytherin man.
Get that Slytherin, man.
And so what they've actually done with the most recent edition is you're supposed to play the game by using a subset of the cards that all the wizards have. So you're supposed to use 2 different catnises. I don't know anything about magic. So it's like, okay,
I think is probably what
that's
you mean.
right. What is a cat trip?
A cantrip's like a little device or item that has magical power.
Does it have anything to do with cats?
No.
Okay. So they're broken out into like 8 different cant trips. Is that what you said? Cant trip?
Cantrip.
As in can't trip.
Yep.
Right?
As in cantrip.
Cantrip.
Oh, as in can trip.
Yeah.
I see. Well,
Oh,
I'm
actually wrong.
okay.
Oh God, you're the magician.
That is true. That is embarrassing. We'll have
It
to
is.
cut this out.
It just says it's just a type of spell, a tricky spell, a small
To the
spell,
outro with you,
a mischievous
you
trick.
bad magician.
What am I thinking of?
Chaos.
Yep.
You're always thinking of chaos. And so joining me as always are my co-hosts Kellen the Red Tank and
Hello.
Neelan. Sorry, Kellen the Red Tank.
Yes.
No, you say hello. I'm trying to give you another shot. Kellen the Red
oh.
Tank.
Hi.
God damn it! Don't say anything.
Oh,
Kellen the Red Tank.
you said don't say anything. What are you?
Chaos.
It's a great outro.